Welcome to Pints and Politics. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. As our regular listeners and viewers know, Pints and Politics is a community-driven event. I mean, this seems like an event, guys, where we get together and talk about some of the most important issues facing our state and our region. But we do it the way politics and issues ought to be discussed. We enjoy delicious Nebraska craft beer. So welcome. If you're following along on your bingo card at home, this is episode number 34, believe it or not. And but let me introduce our guests today, because this is an important issue that I think a lot of you will enjoy. So Andy Pollock is an attorney and lobbyist with Rumbold Ludke law firm here in Lincoln. And Andy, this has to be a typo, Andy, when I looked this up. You've been practicing law for over 24 years.
Yeah, I saw that same typo the other day.
Yeah.
Listing off the biography.
Yeah, you need your helpers to edit that out somehow. But you've been with Rumbold Ludke for a lot of those years, right?
Yeah, about half of that time.
Yeah.
That's right.
And prior to that, Andy was the executive director and general counsel for the Nebraska Public Service Commission.
Right. We'll probably talk a little bit about the PSC tonight.
Yeah. And a little known fact, I always try to find some little known tidbits. So a little known fact about Andy, he had a stint on Broadway with a musical, with The Sound of Music. And by the way, Christopher Plummer, God bless him,
Right.
passed this past week.
And apparently that was like one of his least favorite appearances I read. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain your Broadway debut?
I think I played the trombone in the band accompanying. My sister was the youngest daughter. What was her name? Gretel?
Greta?
Greta. Yeah. But I went to a bunch of performances and I think I played the trombone, but
because I always tried to put you on stage.
You might have, yes.
Instead of in the orchestra pit.
It was somewhere in the cemetery. Yeah.
So just anyway, inside baseball, Andy and I actually graduated together not together, you're way younger than I am, but Ogallala High School back in the day, and we both were involved in The Sound of Music.
Right.
So
Anyway. And here we are.
It wasn't Broadway, it was Ogallala. It could have been your launch into that.
No, I'm pretty sure there was no launch there ever in the works.
Okay. Well,
great days though.
Welcome. It's about darn time we had you on Pints and Politics.
Thank you.
Because
it's great to be here.
We share an adult beverage once in a while.
We do. Prior
to the pandemic, but now we get to do it and talk about a really important issue that you're champion.
Right. Now I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to your left, my right. No, both your left, everybody else's right. Now, how's that work? Anyway, Kyle Arganbright. Kyle is the one of the co-founders and executive vice president of Sandhills State Bank in Alliance. Wow, in Valentine, Nebraska.
We do have a location in Alliance. But
okay.
Yep, I'm located in Valentine.
Yeah, and Kyle's also into politics because you serve as the mayor of Valentine.
I am, although I try to stay apolitical.
So we'll have to have some friendly banter back and forth because we had another mayor of a small town on the show recently. Josh Moaning.
Yeah.
A mayor of Norfolk.
Good guy. Yep.
So we're trying to go through all of the small town mayors in Nebraska. And Kyle was walking by. How we got the Lincoln, I don't know. We'll find that out. But Kyle, in addition to his role at the Sandhills State Bank, most importantly, he's the co-founder of Bolo Beer Company in Valentine.
Yep. Yeah, we started it about 6 years ago. We have the best water in the world. I wanted a brewery. You couldn't get craft beer in Nebraska or in western Nebraska at the time. And the day after my first child, my daughter, was born, I was in the hospital and put an ad out on the internet looking for a brewer. And we had 60 applicants, and so it suddenly became very real, even though I think the attempt was one to maybe silence my inner my inner itch. So we've been at it for about 6 years, and we've We distribute all through western Nebraska, western South Dakota, but really focus on Valentine and taproom experience. We want people to get something if they come to Valentine.
Well, and Valentine's a great community. If you've not been to Valentine, you're missing out on a lot. So I've introduced you gentlemen. We're going to get to our topic, but as is our tradition, let's talk about our beer and how wonderful that we have the founder of the craft beer company right here. So Kyle, tell us what we're drinking.
We have 2 beers, so all of our beers, we focus on the water. The fact that we don't treat, reverse osmosis, or filter our water is really unique in brewing. It's just perfectly clean coming out of the aquifer. The sand's done the filtering for us. So we have 2 IPAs, a hazy and a West Coast. The hazy IPA is called a Happy Juice. Oftentimes we try to brand things around the Sandhills or Western culture. This beer just made us happy, so we called it Happy Juice. And the other one is called Alpaca Lips. We brewed it
I'm sorry, say it again.
Alpaca Lips.
Okay.
We brewed it at the start of the pandemic when bars and breweries were shut down. We tried doing some new beers to get people in, and we wanted to call it the Apocalypse IPA. But it turns out 10 Barrel, which is owned by AB InBev, which is the beer monopoly.
You would need Andy if you got into that mess. Right?
Yeah,
trademark.
So we didn't exactly want to get sued by one of the largest companies in the world, but it would have been fun. So I guess we changed it a little bit. Alpaca Lips it is, but yeah. So it's a little crisper, a lot more citrusy notes, and the hazy is just designed to be really melony. Little pineapple in there too. It's your Citra mosaic, the Batman and Robin of IPAs, and then we throw a couple other hops in there too. But
well, this is great. I am a hazy IPA type of guy, and I mentioned earlier, before Andy showed up, we started without him, but this is one of the smoother hazy IPAs I've ever had.
Great.
And it's great. So cheers, guys.
Hey, cheers. Thank you. Thanks for the beer, Kyle.
You bet. I told Dan I had to put it in a cooler to keep it warm on the way down.
To keep it from freezing. It was in the back of your
I
truck.
don't think it got over 3 degrees on the entire trip down.
I like ice cold beer.
It's a new kind of ice cold.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we will put the notes and about Bolo Beer Company. So when you go to the website to look up this episode, you'll find out all about Bolo Beer. So thank you, Kyle, for the beer.
Welcome.
Thank you for being here all the way from Valentine. Well, Andy, because of your work for years in the telecommunications industry in Nebraska, you are one of the leading experts in Nebraska on this topic, and you're working through your law firm to accomplish some things in Nebraska that are sorely needed with broadband expansion. So just dive in and give us kind of the 101 of what's going on with broadband in Nebraska.
Yeah, it's almost hard to start. There's so much going on, Dan. As we were talking about, as we made arrangements for this, there are about 10 broadband bills being heard today and tomorrow. The governor asked Senator Friesen, the chair of the Transportation Committee, Transportation Telecom Committee, to introduce a bill on his behalf. The governor introduced that bill this morning. I give kudos to Governor Ricketts for making this a top priority. It's not often that the governor goes and speaks at a legislative hearing. This is the first time a bunch of us lobbyists could remember the governor addressing this particular committee. It's certainly the first time that I'm aware of that a governor's talked about the importance of communications in Nebraska and basically leveled with the public and said things I think we all know, and that is that we have areas in Nebraska, rural areas in Nebraska, including, remarkably, unfortunately, some small cities and towns that just don't have broadband access. And as the governor said, I don't know his words this morning, but the way I would put it is the COVID pandemic that we're still living through didn't create that need, but it certainly exposed it. It exposed the need to have better access for our kids to educational services, to doctors for telehealth. There's amazing things that we can do on the internet, but you can't do that if you're not connected.
And for those of us that seems to be a foreign concept, because So we're at Fuse Co-working. I've been up here for 5 years now. Wonderful. We're in the heart of the startup community in Lincoln, Nebraska. Allo supplies our high-speed internet, and when I go home, I also have Allo, but I don't have this Allo. I mean, so this has to be one of the highest high-speed internets, maybe certainly in Lincoln, but maybe in the state. So it's foreign to me. I understand the concept. So what are the limitations for people who live in rural Nebraska?
You don't have to go very far to find rural Nebraska. I grew up in Ogallala, but I still work here in Lincoln. But about 6 years ago, our family bought a place in eastern Seward County, just a half mile across the Lancaster County line. We don't have good broadband there. I have a fixed wireless tower, has been owned by a good little mom and pop shop out of Waverly, and the service has been decent. But another company put up a fixed wireless tower about a month ago, and now it interferes with my signal. I even have trouble with some of my communications devices in the town.
Wow.
But I still am fortunate. I have decent fixed wireless service, although it's not what it was. But people out in Kyle's neck of the woods, in the Sandhills, in the Panhandle, don't even have fixed wireless. I mean, they're relying on old copper networks, and unfortunately, there's some telephone companies in the state that, rather than upgrading to fiber, they've left their copper network out there, and they've kind of neglected that copper network. So sometimes people in rural counties, truly rural counties, like Cherry County, where Kyle's from, have gone not only without broadband for weeks at a time, but without basic phone service.
That's just incomprehensible. So Kyle, I mean, so you run a bank, you own a craft beer company in a very thriving, to me, modern rural setting in Valentine. I think of Valentine as a very progressive city. So what's your experience in Valentine with the lack of efficient broadband?
We knew it was a problem before the pandemic. At the bank, trying to secure the appropriate bandwidth and security on lines was almost prohibitively expensive. The amount of money that we've spent just to achieve the type of connectivity that people take for granted in Lincoln and Omaha is disgusting. Beyond that, during the pandemic, there were churches that couldn't deliver services because they didn't have the upload speed to do so. There were kids that couldn't connect to classes, not even just Zoom, but even to download their basic curriculum during the pandemic. We had, and this is minor in the scheme of things, you couldn't regularly stream Netflix.
Well, that's very important in this day.
Right, and psychological health's important. We've got to have some rest and relaxation too. But all of those things combined, it's my neighbor across the street, he works from home. He said, when I left Sioux Falls 10 years ago, I had 100 meg down. He's like, do you think Valentine will ever get to that?
Wow.
And good news is we just developed a public-private partnership with Allo to bring fiber to the home in Valentine, so we're going to be there. But it was, there were several points during this. Andy and I had talked about this for years out in Valentine, and the Public Service Commission has been great in helping solve a lot of the rural issues out there. There's a fiber to the home project that's happening throughout rural Cherry County right now, and that's solving some of those issues of people that couldn't even get phone service. At our family ranch, you can't get phone service right now.
Wow.
It might be because the cord's outside, it's on top of the road right now, but they'll fix that. But we've got that happening. We've got the fiber to the home in Valentine, but it's a people attraction issue too. I met a guy at the brewery this summer, and he was talking about how he was a recruiter for Amazon, Google, and he was specifically recruiting work-from-home engineers. And their theory was they could save money by placing people throughout the country. And he's like, people would love to be in Valentine. He asked me about housing. That was the first question. I said, housing's, it's there, but might be a little expensive. He said, what do you have for broadband? I said, 25 down and 3 up. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Wow. There's a real-life monetary example of what we're missing out on.
Oh, yeah.
If we're going to continue to beat the drum for rural Nebraska, because that is the perception, that we can do our jobs anywhere and work from anywhere, and our kids can be educated and we can be entertained. But The reality is we are very, very limited.
The reality, though, is also that we have great opportunity out there. People want to get out of cities. People are looking for wide open spaces. And there are some companies out there. I don't want to sound negative about all telephone companies. I represent 7 rural telephone companies. Every one of them has fiber to the premises throughout their territory. And one of those is a little cooperatively owned telephone company called Hemingway. It's in Box Butte County. It's the county seat. Tiny little town, very sparsely populated. With support from the federal and state government over the last 20-some years, Hemingford was able to put fiber to the home and ranch and farm no matter how far away they were from town. And some of those ranches stand out alone 50 miles from town, and those ranchers are still getting fiber-based internet service, so they can get a gig plus. The success story I like to tell to kind of counter what Kyle said is a young woman, fresh out of college, has a great consulting job in Chicago, wants to return home, Box Butte County. The question that her employer asked was, you can work remote, but do you have broadband? She was able to say, I've got fiber to my mom's farm, or my mom and dad's farm outside of Hemingford, Nebraska. So she did. She moved back here. She's married. They've started a family. She continues to do that job. The Chicago firm liked her work ethic so well that they said, do you have any friends in western Nebraska?
Wow.
And they brought some other people on in that same area. But they're only able to do that because of that fiber service.
So, and Kyle, I know you're testifying actually this week too on some of these bills that Andy is helping to shepherd. So what are some of these bills? Give us just a thumbnail sketch of where do we go and how do we solve this problem? Kyle, maybe you talk about what you're going to testify on. And
one of the big components of all of these bills is redefining what broadband speed is. And so 25 down and 3 up was previously defined as broadband. So we had these CARES Act grants this summer, and any community who had less than 25 down and 3 up based upon the Nebraska Broadband Grant was eligible for grants to bring fiber to the home. And there was $20 million put out by that.
40
eligible, but I think
right. 29 total.
29 total was given out. Valentine, we thought we were in the running. CenturyLink, well, the 2 providers both had that or less, and at the very last minute, one provider increased speeds just enough that we were disqualified. But the difference between the 40 down and 4 up that they were then providing and the 25 down and 3 up was fairly insignificant. So it's to redefine the broadband speeds at a much higher rate that really future-proof, particularly any public investment, so that we don't have to go back to the well in 10 years or 15 years. This is a generational investment. So that's one of the components of what we'll be talking about tomorrow.
Can I jump in real quick? The governor's bill increased the standard to 100 by 100 as well. And he said this morning, we need not just internet service, but quality broadband service, quality. What he means is speeds that work for students at home, for banks, for small business people, for telehealth. There's another bill that Kyle will be testifying on tomorrow, that I will be as well, that makes sure we increase the speeds, not just for the governor's program, but for all government programs. And the thinking is the same as yesterday, or today, as the governor said. We want to aim high, we want quality services, and then to pick a phrase that Kyle just used, we need to future-proof our network so we're not rebuilding it every 5 years.
So, not to blow smoke up your chaps, Andy, but is that a phrase?
Is now.
I think it is now.
But you really
started on your second beer. That's
one and a half. Yeah, I just poured a half. But you really are uniquely qualified for this moment in time to get Nebraska over this hump because you are from rural Nebraska. You have interests throughout western Nebraska. You was the director of the Public Service Commission, so you were the regulatory agency that oversaw this, and now you're a well-established, well-respected attorney and lobbyist in relationships within the Nebraska Legislature and government. How come it's taken this long? What have you seen, I guess, through your career that now is the time to get this done?
Well, I think we're long past now is the time to get this stuff done. Now is the time to get it done. It's true because we didn't get it done when it should have been done. There are areas in Nebraska, like I said, that have excellent broadband service. Their providers figured out a way. For every area outside of a city or village, there's no way to make a business case for broadband service. You'd have to charge the customer more than they could pay. And we have a law that requires rates to be comparable across the state. We also have a law that requires service to be comparable across the state. That doesn't mean a digital divide. That means comparable services, whether we're here in the Haymarket or out west. Part of this is lack of accountability in the past. Part of that came from the Public Service Commission where I was. And I think at some point the commissioners who had that agency recognized we need more accountability. In the last 4 years, they've made some major changes. But you know what? There's areas of the state that don't have service, and that's the problem. We need to figure out a way to serve those areas as quickly as possible. The governor's bill helps do that by providing funding. Requiring speeds is a way to make sure that you're holding companies accountable for building a future-proof network. There's another bill up tomorrow that will give communities, people in rural areas, more choice in who their broadband provider is. A lot of the problem that we have today is driven by the fact that Nebraska's been controlled by monopolies that just weren't overseen probably as rigorously as they should have been, and they haven't used support that they've got from the government to build out in rural areas. So we have a lot of the state that just simply aren't served for that reason.
Because the federal government has a role, I assume, in this as well. What's that relationship like?
Schizophrenic at times. Complimentary when it's working. Actually, CenturyLink said some things today that I completely agree with. You need to make sure that federal support goes to help the same service that state support is providing. Right now you have a Nebraska company, a Arkansas company that does business in Nebraska that's asking for state money to build fixed wireless towers in an area that there are already fixed wireless towers, and they're asking the state for money for that. At the same time, you have the federal government giving tens of $millions to a Texas company to buy the existing fixed wireless network in that same area. We don't have good sound practices. Some of the legislation today, or that will be heard tomorrow, should give the company that's not taking care of their territory a good way to move on and transition and allow another carrier to take over that territory.
Kyle, as we begin to think about wrapping up here, but we've got a few more minutes here, but talk a little bit about some of the limitations that you have as a banker, as a business owner, as a parent. You know, what are some of the challenges that you face on a daily basis? And not, maybe we should have asked Allo to be a sponsor too on this, because we keep mentioning Allo, but that has to be a really bright spot for Valentine, that not only a company is coming in to provide some broadband relief, but it's a Nebraska company.
It's huge. I mean, and we'd had conversations with several companies. There are other really good companies out here too. Allo's really leading the way and getting aggressive about it. But they partnered with us in a way that allowed the city to participate, that allowed the city some control long term, so that we didn't just create a monopoly and get back to where we are today in 20 years. But the limitations are real. At the bank, I bet we've been spending an extra $500 a month to achieve the type of connectivity that is standard in Lincoln and Omaha. And we've been in business for 10 years. So you do the math pretty quick. That could have made a pretty big impact in your community. Locally, it's just frustrating. The brewer's wife, she works for Cisco. She represents the region out west, selling food products and food supply through Cisco, and she cannot typically take internet calls at her house because the maximum download she can get there is 12 megabits. And so some afternoon she'll be at the brewery while Chris is, her husband's brewing, just to simply participate in a Zoom call.
Wow.
If my daughter's now 6, she's got a little Amazon Kindle, if she's on a video and if I'm on my phone, my wife can't stream Bridgerton on Netflix, which is a larger problem than I thought it was. So there's, it's...
Who knew?
Right. I mean, this is... I just feel like we're literally solving 1999's problems in 2021.
Wow. We are.
And so we need to get this whipped. We need to figure out how to just blanket the rest of the state in broadband quickly, as efficiently as possible, and make sure that this isn't a problem in the future. And then we need to go figure out whatever the next problem is that we've treated like broadband.
That's great.
Because if we've got another one like this, we have just this deferred maintenance issue that we're going to be tackling forever, and we can't get in front of issues and take advantage of the giant work from home movement that's happening during the pandemic. The number of jobs that Nebraska is losing right now because we don't have broadband throughout the state is greater than we probably just saved by giving Fiserv money.
Wow. Well, so let's do whip this. Andy, tell our listeners and viewers what they can do. What are there bill numbers? What can we do? What can we do to help get this across the finish line?
Oh,
that's a pretty easy question.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, bill numbers, what the governor's doing with LB 388 is important. And I think everybody agrees is a priority this session. You didn't see anybody oppose it today. So I don't know that you need to jump on that bandwagon and support it. But another key to this is just making sure that companies are accountable for the money that they're getting. Make sure that they're building Kyle's future-proof network that he needs today. Hold people accountable and give consumers choice. LB 338 does that in a unique way, which kind of takes it from, rather than a bureaucratic decision down, which has been the case at the federal level, it allows consumers in rural areas to say, these are what our needs are. Our current provider's not providing those needs. We'd like to work with this provider of our choosing, just like Valentine chose Allo. They would have any number of choices. There's any number of companies that want to serve rural Nebraska and have shown an ability to do that, including Allo, including the Hemingway telephone company that I mentioned. Give them a chance to move into those areas, but let the consumer choose who they want to work with. Encourage public-private partnerships. That's not something we've talked a lot about. Kyle mentioned it. That's critical. We need to make that easier. We need to allow public power, and we need to allow municipalities to help finance the costs of broadband projects. There's some legislation on that tomorrow. We just need to be smart. We need to work together. We need to break down barriers. We need to find ways to cost-effectively build what the governor coined today as a critical infrastructure. He said, we're good in Nebraska in serving our rural community, our number one industry in agriculture, because we have great roads in rural Nebraska. We need to do the same thing with broadband. It's important to our ag economy, for precision ag, and also for diversifying that economy as well, like Kyle has done with his brewery. There's opportunities for people to create crazy jobs out in western Nebraska, and we can connect right now and do that. So educate yourself, learn more about what the Public Service Commission does. It holds a key role in this. It has a program that doles out about $30–40 million in funds for rural areas, and that money will be more available for competition in the near future. So educate and jump in.
Well, that is great advice, Andy, and so I will have some notes at the end of the show, so how you can get involved and encourage your state senators and the governor and the Public Service Commission to continue to move towards whipping this into the 21st century, right? Let's get all of us on the same page and be able to provide jobs and all of the things that a broadband expansion in Nebraska will do. So thanks, guys. Let me, before I thank our hosts, I just want to thank you guys once more for joining us on Pints and Politics. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Well, thanks for joining us. Let me thank our sponsors. First of all, Andy Pollock and Rumbold Udke Law Firm. the Nebraska Horsemen's Benevolent Protection Association, Pints and Politics producer, Mr. Steve Van Hoosen, Kim Remington, operations manager at Parsons Public Relations. Probably you're hearing the theme music of Pints and Politics, which was produced and written and performed by Mr. Jack Rodenberg, Fuse Co-working and Parsons Public Relations, and our guests, Mr. Andy Pollock, Mr. Kyle Arganbright. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.